My name is Bjorn Horn. I'm known, though, as Bjorn the Red by all of the doings and things that I've done when I was a Viking. And, it wasn't a small position. It was very dangerous work. Being a Viking, just living in a Viking village was dangerous. There are all kinds of things like chickens running around that you could trip on, or, the shield wives are always doing their new sport, the pregnant pole vaulting, where they're running with a big stick and propelling themselves up over a sideways stick and floating like a big fluffy cloud over the top and trying to land like a big fluffy cloud, but it wasn't never working that way. Lots of thunder and shaking of the ground. Floki would have to come out of his drinking cave and to fix things, and he was never quite, very happy with these conditions. He would rather be down there, drinking and making the vomit on the floor. But he's very upset now because of this pregnant pole vaulting. They had to do a sport because, when we stopped taking those shield wives on the raids with us, because they were, always talking on the boats, look at the Ragnar's such a big muscles, he's so good looking. Why can't Bjorn be, more like Ragnar? And so we're, instead of doing the slapping, we would just say, we're not going on a raid. We're just going to places we have already conquered to do the merrymaking. And then we would just hang our shields on the side of the ship. That's how it was getting started back then. When you see in the pictures with all the shields, when Ragnar said we should do this, I said that it could be dangerous because it looks like 6 or 8 bullseyes, for the people to shoot the arrows into. And he said, it doesn't matter if an arrow hits just one shield. And I said to Ragnar, yes, but it's just not one part of the boat that goes to the bottom of the ocean. When it gets hit with you get a hole in the boat. It's not the rules according to the law of the gravity. If the whole ship goes down, and, the captain, of course, goes down with the ship. And he said, but we don't, we don't have a captains. That's the French thing. The Capitan. I started to protest some more because I'm Bjorn the Red, which is what to do. I stand up to Ragnar, but he was throwing me over the board there into the water, and I was swallowed by a big fish, and I had to sleep in the fish 3 days. Then I went to the close village and told them everything Thor told me to say. I am the Brynja smiter in the village as the mail maker, not the mail with the penis or the mail with the envelope, but the mail with the chains you put on when you go on the big raid. It's not the same as the one who is making the swords or the spears. I was the one who discovered this. The whole thing about you put the little metal circles together and you make a big quilt, like a big metal ring quilt, and you put it on yourself. You can stop the English arrows. Now you've got the boats with the big targets on the sides. So then when we were going to the Parisians, at first they were just throwing the moldy, stale croissants, they would light them on fire and dump them down on the boats. And I tried to warn Ragnar about this too. The Vikings, especially in the village of Haverstad, which is where I'm from, we are telling this story, the Viking story, called The Peterson and the Wolf. Peterson and the Wolf is about a little boy that goes around the ground with a wooden sword. But while he was out, making play in the backyard, the big wolf came and ate his favorite duck. His little duckling was eaten by the big wolf, which wasn't very nice. But it was maybe a Danish wolf. Is just some of the speculation about the story, but it's mostly, legend and myth. I heard this story when I was a little boy, and I was very sad for the duck. About the wolf would come eat, the ducky and just shit it out like it was nothing, leave it on the rock to dry. And I was I lost much sleep. I could not, had the nightmares. I prayed to Thor, and he said he could not help me right then because he was busy in the place with the Viking called Captain America, because he was just kept running into the battle with only a shield. So Thor had to go with his big hammer and do a lot of the work. And that's why he couldn't help me with the nightmares about the ducky. And I said to my father, Eric the Red, you know of him, I said, Papa, could we maybe give the ducky a funeral? And we could just put it in a boat and send it out and, shoot the fiery arrows at it. It seems like it would be a nice thing to do. And he said, Bjorn, you are living in the fancy world. Maybe the duck could come back from the boat rocking across the water like Jesus was, and maybe do the great miracles in Haberstadt. Is that what you like too? Did you like to live in a fancy world like that? It was a very abusive way to grow up, even in the Viking world. But, the Peterson and the wolf was very sad for me, but it was also very inspiring. It made me want to, beat wolves with small sticks and things. A couple of years later, I was in the woods doing the Rumspringa, where you can, do all kinds of things that are naughty and get away with it for a year. But you also have to fight, all the kind of bears and things like this. And if you come back, then you're fit to be a Viking. After, something around 3 or 4 maybe years, it was successful. I was coming back when I was something like 21. And that's when I was able to do the mail making. And I was very happy with this job until Rollo, said, let's go to Paris again. We want to go to Paris because the king is doing the merrymaking, and they went down to talk to Floki in the drinking cave because Floki had become a Christian down in the drinking cave. He was joined by some missionaries who were reading him things on, Latin and other languages that can't be understood by humans. So Rollo went to Ragnar, said that Floki had become a Christian, and Ragnar, he just took his sword and cut Rollo's nose right off in front of him. He said, maybe you can't roll a Rollo to your friends, but you can roll Rollo's nose to them. But it was a true thing. This became a very important Viking axiom, rolling Rollo's nose. I stayed there in Haverstadt probably until it was when Thor was coming. Thor was always making his rounds, because he was a god of the Viking people. He was come to make his rounds of the village people. And when I saw this, I looked into the boat and I saw an Indian and a man with the motorcycle pants and the big handlebar mustache. It's not very Viking, way to do your facial hair. But also was there the Captain America. And so there was big merrymaking in the village, and the pole vaulting was happening with the pregnant ladies. So many men were watching the fluffy clouds fly over the big sideways stick. And my father said, I cannot take this. There is just a man here in a tight, skinny suit with just only a shield. And then Thor is having to do all of his work for him. And I need to go to a village where this isn't, happening. And so I felt very lonely. But not like the ducky, I started to walk towards him to say goodbye. And I stepped in something. I thought it was maybe the poop or something. It was Rollo's nose down there. So I picked it up and I made a necklace out of it. And that's how that tradition was getting going. I've read all those books about the Alexander the Great, but I still don't know what's so great about him. He died when he was 30 years old. Jesus died when he was 33. So there's 3 years more of world conquering. Also, Alexander was always running around with his father's army with the super long big sticks when they fold them out, looking like a big porcupine. And, you might laugh and think that's very, making a lot of silly. But when you think about it, would you want to take on an army that looked like a big porcupine coming at you? Where do you even put the arrows? You don't even know it. It doesn't even have eyes, but it's still coming at you. And that's basically, he was using his father, King Philip, had the porcupine army. He was mostly stuck in the Hindu Kush mountain chains with the big elephants. The Vikings we would have gone right through the mountains. You don't have to go over them. That is what, the dynamite is for. Everyone thinks it was the Greeks that made the dynamite, but it wasn't, because Alexander was there. He was going over the mountains with the elephants. Not a piece of dynamite to be found. And while he's sitting there, he realized it's cold, very cold. The soldiers are shaking, in their boots. And he said, I'm sorry, but we're a little bit behind schedule. And so we're going to have to start eating the elephants. And so he's there, eating. This is just before he died, and he had to give his country to the 4 generals, because he had no children, because he wasn't into the parts there on the woman that's there for the making of the children. He didn't like that. He liked the furry, the man spots there. So he didn't have any children. And it got really cold one night, So he decided we're going to have to eat these elephants, but we don't want to waste anything because the Great Spirit will be upset with us. If we are making frivolous and just killing things to kill them for no reason, like you're going on a big raid or something. So he is eating the elephant there in the tents, but really the tent was they went and took big sticks and put it inside the elephant's skin, and they just carved it out and made their steaks and dinners. And they would eat them inside the elephant's, the skin. Like Leonardo DiCaprio did there with the horse in that movie. They did it with the elephants. There's much more room. You can fit 8 or 12 people in there. They had, probably hundreds of elephants. So it's just like a big camp of elephant carcass, with the lanterns. And he's eating, his dinner in obviously the biggest elephants. He's eating by himself. He doesn't know what's going to happen. I'm going to get all my father's armies killed and destroyed. Then there will be no more porcupine army. And then he's making these decisions suddenly, right out of the blizzard snow. There's a little tiny ducky walking into his tent. Can you believe it? Just out of nowhere up there in all of that snow. So he was basically taking the ducky with him. He said, I feel bad for you. I'm going to take you with me. I don't have any children, so I'm just going to call you my son. And that is when, in the little elephant tent in the Hindu Kush, he said, my son, ask for thyself another kingdom, because the one I leave for thee is too small for thee. But maybe you're a little bit frivolous there, because how big a kingdom does a ducky need? He could basically be having one right there in the elephant tent. And so now the whole world is going around thinking, the Ptolemies there, they own the Egypt, and the Seleucids owned the Israel and places around that. But it was all really owned by a duck. And that would have been really what happened, if not for one sort of deranged wolf. That's what history would have sounded like, because you can't make this up. So I was very, upset by this dream, and I went down to the drinking cave to talk to Floki and tell him my dream. I said, I had this horrible dream about the wolf and the ducky, and my father thinks, he says I'm being a dandy, I'm being a milk drinker, and he thinks I should go on the Rumspringer right now. Here I am, just 8 years old, and I'm not doing the things the Spartan boys are doing right now. And Floki said, sit down on the rock here. I'm doing the Blood Eagle on the Christian missionary to come in. And I said, tell me about, while you're doing the Blood Eagle, tell me what I do with this dream. But, Floki was very focused, because he made the little long cut in the middle of the man's back, and then a little cross cut on the top of that, and then a little bottom across cut on the bottom. And he just opened up the man's back like a cupboard, and just pulled them aside so that the air could go in and just to make a chaos with all the nerve endings. And while the man was, screaming and screaming, he was saying, but look in here, young Bjorn. You see now that we can pull the heart out without breaking all the ribs and making the big mess. You see, this is going to be making a big medical advancement. And now we can take also the spleen and maybe the 2 lungs, if you can get them past the little pokey thing there, and put them in a wheelbarrow and take them to the pagans and sell them at a good price for doing their weird rituals. We don't do the things the pagans do. They're really barbaric people. But, the Vikings are the civilized people, not like Alexander the Great. But I said to him, but you're not hearing about my dream. And Floki said, well, what, young Bjorn, why are you so distressed about this dream? And I said, there are so many questions about it. What was the wolf doing there by himself? Because the wolves are hunting in packs. There is a packing order. And the orders are you've got to go with the rest of your friends. You can't do it by yourself. So maybe he was also an outcast or something. Floki was just shaking his head and shaking his head. Look at the heart. Look how easy I pulled it out. And he's taking some more drinks of the special berry wine that he was making down there in the drinking cave. And he just kept shaking his head. And he said, oh, young Bjorn, you have so many things to do before, you can go on the big raid. And I said, well, look at you. You're not even building ships anymore. He was doing this thing about the Christians were, something like the Great Satan or something, coming to erase all of Halberstadt and every village around it. But that's basically, I think, all of the history lessons I can be giving you right now.